How can we stop being so hard on ourselves? How can we overcome that pressure? Because we all benefit from it when we do, right? We benefit from it as individuals, but our children benefit from it, and other moms who see us benefit from it.
Welcome to the Worthy Mother Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Hardy, a mom of two on a mission to help moms everywhere feel less alone. This is not a parenting podcast. Instead, it's a space for pushing back against societal expectations of perfection and embracing self-compassion in your motherhood journey. Let's get into it.
Hey, welcome to Worthy Mother Podcast. I am so happy that you are here today, taking this time for you, taking this time to really pour into yourself. I know listening to a podcast can be a small act, but the messages that we're talking about here really are doing something to normalize normal experiences in motherhood and help us all really understand that we're not alone in the things that we're struggling with, and also that we exist in a world that can make things hard sometimes. And so I really want to take a moment to acknowledge that, how incredible it is that you're showing up here for yourself, and also just how awesome it is for me to have you tuning in. I really appreciate it. It really means a lot to me that you are here. Having said that, if you are not yet subscribed to the podcast, I strongly recommend that you do subscribe wherever you listen, so that every week when a new episode comes out, you are notified of that. You see it in your podcast platform app, whatever it is, and can see like, oh, there's a new episode. We're also on YouTube, so if you prefer listening to things on YouTube, you can find it there, but definitely make sure you are subscribed to Worthy Mother Podcast wherever you like to listen. Today's episode is really geared towards a message that I just feel like I need to share right now. And that is, stop being so hard on yourself. And I'm going to make the assumption that you probably are somebody who is hard on yourself sometimes, whether that's something that's very apparent right now in your life or just something that throughout your life you've been hard on yourself. I think a lot of times the women who are tuning into podcasts like this, where we're trying to understand our experiences better, part of that is because we find ourselves being hard on ourselves, and navigating that in the space of motherhood where there is so much pressure and there is so much responsibility. And so when we have all that pressure, and it can just be really stressful and create this cycle of everything feels hard and we can't take care of ourselves, and what are we supposed to do about it, right? And so we have to kind of interject that cycle when we are stuck in those seasons of feeling like we're being really hard on ourselves, and maybe the self-compassion isn't arising to the surface in the way that it would be most helpful to be. Because when we can give ourselves space and grace to be and exist and know that like it's not all bad, that can be really important. But again, we get caught in a trap of just being hard on ourselves, and it tends to have negative consequences rather than making anything better. My goal is that by listening to this, you will have the space to release some of the burdens of unrealistic expectations and really embody self-compassion. When we think about all of the things that we are supposed to do, and I say that supposed to in a way that like there's expectations that are put on us. And then there's also responsibilities that actually, as a mom, it is your responsibility to do something, right? As a parent, it's your responsibility to do something for your child. When we think about all of those shoulds, those supposed tos, things have changed a lot over the last 100 years, over the last 60 years, over the last 20 years, over the last 10 years, right? Even thinking post-pandemic and the world we live in that is so different than the world we lived in back in 2019, right? Things have changed a lot. And so when we're discussing the pressures that we may put on ourselves or that are put on us by society in motherhood, it's really important that we acknowledge how things have shifted. Like, we have to understand and really recognize that the world in which we are mothering in and the expectations of mothers are not the same as they were a generation ago. They're just not. Even just this idea that moms are supposed to do it all and understanding what that all looks like. 50, 60 years ago, women weren't necessarily expected to be working outside of the home and raising children. And even to today, there's still a lot of complexities in that. Women are expected in so many ways to be working outside of the home, making money because of a lot of factors, right? And the reality is that two-income households in a lot of places and for a lot of people are a necessity. And then also just the fact that like women have more rights and abilities to have jobs and careers that they want to have. And there's this expectation then that women will work outside of the home and also be the primary caregivers at home. Those expectations have changed drastically in a fairly short period of time, right? We're talking a generation or two. Even for, millennials, when we were growing up, yes, a lot of us did have moms who worked, but the need may have been different. And even we think about women in the workforce, how that has changed over the last 30 years. Like there's really big shifts that have happened over time that do influence just that one expectation, right? But then we still have expectations that women, again, will be the primary caregiver for their children. It's assumed women will have children. It's assumed that they will be the ones taking care of those children. And that competes with the idea that women should or need to be working outside of the home as well, right? Like you can't win at both of those things. You can't have all of that. I mean, even just the way our workplaces function, just the idea of hustle culture and the pressure to constantly be performing at high levels, constantly doing your best, constantly having your best be better than everyone else. I mean, we are a generation of people who feel the need to perform. We're perfectionists, we're people pleasers, right? We've talked about that. The conditioning that so many of us women have received so early on in our lives and just through our lives that we have to be good at things. We have to be doing things at the top of our ability at all times. There is so much pressure, and it's really not humanly possible to always be at the top of your game in everything you do while also navigating unrealistic expectations of what it means to be a mom, what it means to be someone with a career, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a human existing in this chaotic, nutty world that we all live in. And I would argue that those expectations, regardless of whether you are somebody who has a paying job, outside of raising children, because that is also work. And we've had conversations about how complex it is to even talk about those things because the way we speak about being a mother and caregiving and being a working mom, stay-at-home mom, it's so complex. But I would argue that even for women who don't have a job outside of the home, who don't have paid work that they're doing and their labor really is within the home, these pressures still exist in similar ways, right? Because the expectation is there. And it's like, well, if you're not working outside of the home, then you also need to be doing even better inside of the home. And anything that you're lacking is your fault and you're not good enough, right? Like the expectation is just incredible and not in a good way. And then we add into it the influence of social media and the way that there are so many unrealistic portrayals of motherhood and what it means to be a good mom, what it means to be enough. And as we always say, it's not necessarily explicitly said, although sometimes it very much is explicitly said. But we're just constantly taking in these messages of what good moms do, what we should be doing if we are going to be good enough. And we never are doing all the things that we see as things we should be doing. And so, of course, it's easy to be hard on ourselves. Of course, it's easier to default to, well, I'm not doing enough. If I have this image of what it means to be doing enough, and we're constantly comparing to that, perfect mom that we're seeing online, who we're just seeing this like teeny bitty snapshot of her life. But if we're comparing to that, yeah, there's lots of room to be hard on ourselves. There's lots of room to see our shortcomings, to see what we're not doing, instead of acknowledging all that we are doing and the world that we're existing in and navigating through all of that. When we are constantly comparing ourselves to others that we're seeing online or in our lives where we think we have the full picture, or we're even maybe aware that we don't have the full picture, but we're internalizing it as though we do, like, this is the perfect mom. This mom's got it together so much more than me. She does so much more than me, blah, 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 all the stories we tell ourselves, right? When that's happening, when we are kind of caught in that comparison, it leads to a lot of negative consequences. Mom guilt being a huge one, right? When we are feeling like we're not doing enough to some set standard, and then we make that mean something about that and feel the shame. Like, my house is a mess, I'm not doing enough, and that means I'm not a good mom, right? We make it mean something about us. That's just one example. There's so much guilt and shame that comes along with that. And it can lead to like constant anxiety and feeling like we're never enough, this constant pressure to be doing more, doing more, doing more, and always falling short. And then, as we've talked about so many times here, the burnout that can come from that. of feeling like there's no end in sight. It's just like constant draining. And it's really that lack of self compassion that leads to all those things when we are comparing to others and we are not considering the context in which we are living in and the reality that a lot of times these comparisons are based on unrealistic, unattainable standards in the first place. And so, with all of that, with an understanding of why it is that we are so hard on ourselves and an acceptance that that also is just part of existing as a modern mother in this modern world, it's then important that we look at and understand like, how can we stop being so hard on ourselves? How can we overcome that pressure? Because we all benefit from it when we do, right? We benefit from it as individuals, but our children benefit from it, and other moms who see us benefit from it. And so I'm going to offer you a few ideas of ways to kind of release that pressure, embrace self compassion, and ultimately stop being so hard on yourself. So, the first thing that I recommend doing is defining success for yourself, defining what it means to be successful in your life, in your day to day as a person, as a mom, really getting clear on what that looks like. A lot of times this is different season to season in our lives, right? I always like to point back to like the newborn stage where things are kind of more survival mode. You're really just like getting through the day. That's the goal, right? And as your kid becomes more independent and they're sleeping longer, you move out of that survival mode to an extent, right? Like there's more space to have a different level of success. Maybe it's getting out of the house for the day. Maybe it's making a play date and having fun over the weekend. Maybe it's getting time to yourself, right? Like it changes as you go through the time and you're not so trapped with a newborn baby trying to just sleep when you can sleep. But that happens at all different stages of our lives. As our kids grow, sometimes there's going to be more on the calendar, more on the plate, and the definition of success is going to be a lot different than when you are in a position where you have a lot of time and energy and space and things are going really well with the kids. Like it always is changing. But getting clear on what the definition of success for you at that time is really important so that we can understand when we are challenging these unrealistic expectations that exist. If we can then have something to look at and say, okay, well, Instagram tells me that to be successful as a mom, I need to have a perfectly clean house and my kids need to be perfectly put together and we need to be doing all these things, getting the cute pictures and making the good meals and all the things, all the things. Okay, well, now I have actually my definition of success. My definition of success is that I'm going to be able to, let's say, have my workday, shut the computer at the end of my workday, not have to touch work again, be really present for my kids for 2 hours once I pick them up from school until my oldest goes to soccer practice. I'm going to be really present for them. And then for dinner, we're just going to make sure everyone's fed. And that might mean tonight we're having cereal and apples dipped in peanut butter. That's something that happens at my house sometimes. And if I can get through that day, if I can be present with my kids, then I will consider it a success, right? And I'm not worried about the fact that we didn't do some fancy home cooked, beautiful meal because that wasn't part of what was going to make my day successful or not. I'm not holding to any standard of that. So it's okay, right? It's okay that we didn't do that because my success doesn't hinge on that. So really, when we are challenging those unattainable, unrealistic, unnecessary standards that exist out there, making sure you have this view of what standards you are holding yourself to is really powerful, really beautiful, and just makes it more concrete in your mind of like feeling like you're not just like saying, oh, screw it. Like, I don't care about being a good mom. It's like, no, you can still care about being a good mom and doing the things you want. It's just defining what that means for you, defining what success means for you, and just measuring up to that instead of all this other crap that you're getting, all this other noise. Another way that we can embrace self-compassion is by creating self-compassion practices. So sometimes that's having affirmations. I know affirmations can be something that a lot of people feel like they don't do much. And I agree that an affirmation by itself doesn't necessarily solve the whole problem. But when you can get clear on what it is that you really believe or want to believe about yourself, like I am good enough, that is a huge one for so many moms. We feel like we're not good enough and we're hard on ourselves when we are not meeting the standards that it would take for us to be good enough because of what I just said. We didn't have that defined vision of what it actually means to be good enough, what success means in our days. So if you can understand that, okay, all of that is noise, I am good enough, and you can use that to help when you're in moments where you are being hard on yourselves, to use that positive affirmation, it can be really powerful. I would say journaling is another way to kind of tap into that. You can journal on something like understanding your expectations of yourself and understanding maybe areas that you want to improve in, but that you are still enough when things aren't going perfectly. When we keep it all in our head and we're keeping it all like just up there and swirling around and telling us how bad we're doing, it doesn't help. It's just going to get worse. We're just going to be bogged down more and more by it. And so being able to like get it out, journal on it, talk to a therapist, talk to a friend, it's so, so powerful and can give so much space for self compassion. Along with that, celebrating small wins is huge. Again, when we are redefining for ourselves what it means to be successful in the day to day, we're redefining success for ourselves, then taking the time to acknowledge those small wins, like, wow, I sat down and played with my kid for 20 minutes before I made them dinner, and that felt really good. And that wasn't really easy for me. Maybe there were other things I felt like I should be doing, but I sat down with them for 20 minutes and we played Legos. Celebrate it. Acknowledge that for yourself. Maybe before bed, get your phone out and write down something that you did that you're proud of. When we are constantly being hard on ourselves, we tend to be acknowledging the things that we're not doing great at and completely missing those things that we are doing great at. And so when we get intentional about celebrating those small things, we see that it adds up. We see that, okay, maybe I'm not failing at this as much as I thought that I was. And then the last way I'll share here of how to kind of tap into that self compassion is to lean on your community, lean on your people. Moms being connected to other moms, other people who are going to lift them up and tell them it's okay and validate for them that things are hard, but that doesn't mean we have to be hard on ourselves is huge. I know I've spoke about this before, but I have friends that I can text when I'm having a hard day or when something's not going great and I'm feeling icky about it, who can just talk me off that ledge of feeling so overwhelmed and consumed by something that I perceive as a failure. A lot of times someone just saying like, oh, that's happened to me too, or reflecting back to the situation with a more realistic perception of what that actually means about you, it can be so helpful. And a lot of times is something that we can't just do on our own unless we're really digging deep and getting into understanding where all of this is coming from. So if you have somebody that you can lean on and turn to in that, it's huge. And with that, I would say too, just making sure the content that you're consuming about mothers, about motherhood is as reflective as possible of what it actually means to be a mom and not this idealized image of perfection. And that can look like a lot of different things, but just being mindful about who we're following on social media, what messages we're taking in so that we can really start to shift our perspective of what it means to be a good mom and stop being so hard on ourselves when we're not reaching some unattainable standard. So self-compassion, it's huge. You do not have to be so hard on yourself. You are enough. You are good enough. You are doing enough. And your small wins deserve to be celebrated. You are worthy of your own appreciation. You are worthy of your own love and care. And I just feel like we need to breathe and release that pressure that we put on ourselves to be perfect because it's not attainable. It's not something that is even an option. And it can lead to so many crummy feelings, burnout, anxiety, and we just don't need it. And I know it's not this simple switch of like, okay, I'm not hard on myself, but I hope there was something in here that you can take in your own life and maybe start to work on. Maybe go through your Instagram and unfollow those accounts that make you feel Maybe you'll take the time to really look at what success means for you. And in this season, what does it mean to be successful as a mom in your day-to-day life? And then celebrating those little wins when you hit those marks because you deserve the celebration. You're doing so much in a world that doesn't always acknowledge that. I hope that you can just be kinder to yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. If you found value in this episode, I would absolutely appreciate it if you would leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It means so much seeing those 5-star reviews. It also shows other moms who are looking for podcasts out there that this might be something that could be positively impactful in their lives. I want more and more moms to be part of these conversations because I really do see the power in being open and honest about all of this and just changing our expectations expectations of ourselves to be more reflective of what's possible and allow us more space for self-compassion and stop being so hard on ourselves. So with that, you are worthy, mama.